Hi, everyone here at Lansing Brewing Company. It is so nice to see everybody. And hello, everyone who is joining at home. We are waving to you from Lansing Brewing Company. We are going to start our official portion of the It's Just Politics, bipartisan issues and ale. But first, some business. You know, when you're listening to public media, it's like, there's a story you want to hear, but first, support for. That's a little bit what we're doing. So hang on. Actually, this one is fun because also when we talk about public media, we always talk about swag. So we want to remind you when you came in to register to win one of 2 Michigan Public swag bags that we are giving away tonight. I would go through all the stuff that's in it, but it's an insane list. And so you're going to get a lot of cool stuff. So make sure you register when you go up and get a second beer. See what I did there? Our next event, the Moth Main Stage, is Friday, June 27th at 8 p.m. at the Michigan Theater in Ann Arbor. This is where just some of the best storytellers, right, come and tell those really meaningful, amazing stories. And you can find details at michiganpublic.org/events, but tickets are going super fast. Okay, a few more things. You guys are just being so great. Who wants to go to Europe? Who wants to go to the Christmas markets during Europe? That kind of stuff, to Christmas markets in Europe. Well, Vincent Duffy, our news director who raised his hand over here, he actually gets to go. That's because we are doing new Michigan Public trips with you. And then also we're doing Mexico City in February to just go eat incredible food. So find out about all of these events at michiganpublic.org/travel. Okay, with all of that, I think it's time to dig in, right? Welcome. As you know, because you are here, this is a really exciting Issues in Ale. Oftentimes we do Issues in Ale with the Capitol Press Corps, our favorite humans in the world who, follow these humans day in and day out with microphones going, what do you think about that, Representative? But today I'm thrilled to...
Yeah, actually, congratulations. You have your own mic.
You have your own mic.
And it's not the House or Senate floor.
Yeah.
Use it whenever we want.
Yeah,
Can we
right,
ask
take it
you
with
the questions?
No,
That's
actually, you must be recognized.
It is a very special occasion. I think in times like this and moments that we are in, we focus a lot on how turbulent things are. And that is because they are. I'm not going to lie about that. But there's also really, really good that happens every single day, right? And these 4 people on stage are politicians, and you can think what you want about politicians, but why we invited these 4 specifically is because these are 4 who, when I talk to the folks on stage, whether they agree with policy or not, they are thoughtful about their beliefs. They are civil in talking about their beliefs. And I'm really excited to be able to highlight some of those conversations. Rick and I are going to ask them questions for a little bit, and then we're going to throw it over to you to ask the questions. And I know you too will be thoughtful and civil because, again, hashtag public media, that's what we're all about, modeling good behavior. So I want to start on my far right, but not politically speaking. And that is Senator Sam Singh, Democrat from East Lansing. Hi.
hello.
Your hometown crowd.
This is a hometown crowd.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. To the senator's left, not politically speaking, is Senator John DeMoose, who I'm going to just say it. This is awful to say, but I'm going to say it. I think represents the most beautiful part of Michigan. I mean, it's all of Traverse, like it's the up north.
This is Zoe's definition of awful.
It's Leelanau Peninsula. I mean, he's got it really hard. Anyway, Senator, thank you for being here.
Having us.
To my left is Representative My Song, her first Issues in Ale. We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you. Nervous, but
don't be nervous. You're with the friends who have been drinking, so we're all good.
Great.
And by the way, you can't tell which half of the room is with you and which half of the room is against
That
you.
is true. I might be able to guess depending on what you're drinking, though.
Oh. The representative has won a seat and represents a really swing district, Warren, Macomb County, and is very also thoughtful, right, about policy and vote and what it means to represent folks who can be very conflicted at times. So I'm really grateful for your time.
Yes, when I tell people I'm from Macomb County, they go, "Oh."
Wait, anyone else from Macomb County here
And then
today?
they're like,
Macomb?
"How did you get elected?"
Yeah. Yes. Interestingly enough, the representative won her reelection, as did Donald Trump in your district as well. So again, just a lot of cross currents that we'll talk about what it means to be civil and bipartisan today. And finally, I'm so thrilled to welcome Representative Mark Tisdall to the stage. I have really wanted the representative since I got to meet him earlier to be at an Issues and Ale, because I think he too is someone that's incredibly thoughtful about policy positions. You may disagree with him, but he will quote like, well,
That bar just keeps getting higher and higher. Yeah.
No, he's like one of the most well-read lawmakers, and I always learn something. So I'm just, again, very
He
appreciative.
presents nice.
Yeah, he presents well. We'll see if he really is, though, after this next hour. And then finally, after all that, this one is Rick Pluta. You know,
And this one is Zoe Clark.
Rick is the senior Capitol correspondent at the Michigan Public Radio Network and my co-host of It's Just Politics. So let's jump in. I just was very Pollyanna-ish and saying how wonderful and unicorn and birthday cakes, but let's just start with, how are things in Lansing right now? Honestly, Senator Singh, you have been around these parts for a long time. I'm going to start with you. How are things?
I'm in year 11 in the legislature. I guess not 11. It's a little bit less than that, but it is slow. Let me use that as the phrase. We have only passed 5 bills through both chambers signed by the governor, and we're in month 6. And so it is the slowest I've ever seen it. And I'm hopeful that the logjam is going to break here in the month of June. There are budgets that need to be discussed. There's a number of bipartisan bills that the House have sent us. We've sent a number of bipartisan bills to the other chamber from the Senate. And now it's time for us to start working. And my hope is, now that we're in the month of June, that this is the right time for us. But it has been slow a little bit. We have a new, obviously, leadership in the House, and I think they're finding their footing, and we're going to see what happens over the next 3 weeks.
And we're going to talk all about what that means for budget negotiations and what it means that only 5 bills have been moved. If you heard what we call the promo for Issues and Ale, we were saying 4 bills, and it is now 5 just within the past 2 days. Governor Gretchen Whitmer signing the 5th bill. Senator.
So there's a breakthrough.
Senator DeMoose, your same question to you. Just, we talk about vibes these days after the vibe election of last year. What are the vibes right now in Lansing?
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that you were so gracious about this, and I'll probably surprisingly be
Minority.
Well, I know, but frankly, I find it just flat out discouraging what we're seeing right now. And being honest, I've only been in this 5 years now. I came out of the business world. We ran our own company for 25 years, and coming into this, I guess I just thought I was naive, that we fight it out during campaigns, and then we come in here, we'll roll up our sleeves and we work for the good of the state. And what I'm finding now, and not present company, present company actually excluded, is that it's politics all day long, all the time. And I am just disgusted by it. In fact, I'm literally at the point where I frankly don't care about the parties one bit anymore. I'll work with anybody who actually wants to get some stuff done. And we saw that, I'll just say that, in no small part, Sam, they did something big last week, passing that 5th bill that I was working hard on. Because if I was them, with the way that the Senate leadership has been treated, frankly, by my own party, I wouldn't run a damn thing that we're doing. But this was an important bill for our district, our school district. And you were having, your caucus is stuck together, and I knew politically it was a challenge for you to do this, but I went and talked to you, and we all talked, a number of people talked to you, said our schools need this. And you guys said, no, you know what? We're going to do this because it's the right thing to do. And I was so impressed, and that's not happening enough these days. So,
well, thank you. Tell us how you really feel, Senator.
Sorry.
Representative, you are new to Lansing after winning a special election and then winning the seat for good in November. What is your take on what the Capitol is like right now?
So I'm used to uncertainty, and I think that's the key word that I hear time and time again. Is there is a lot of uncertainty. But I'd be remiss if I didn't share that there are actually 9 bills that we passed last term that could be presented to the governor, and that would get our acts up to 14. So these 9 bills have been held up by the Speaker of the House. One of them is my bill, 6058, which would help public employees like teachers, police officers, and firefighters. And so, we're working hard. We are a resilient people, but it is it's very uncertain times, very challenging times, and not going to sugarcoat that at all. But given my history and my new take in the legislature, I am in uncharted territory too, and so trying to navigate this new normal, but hearing a lot from constituents, business owners, and just everyone about the uncertainty, not just at the state level, but at the federal level as well too.
Representative Tisdale, we were talking before we came on stage. You spent many years in local government. Now coming to Lansing, when you're with local government, folks, your peeps, who you can turn to. Tell me how things are in Lansing right now compared to that feeling.
Well, in local government, there's not a lot of ideology, do these potholes need to be filled or don't they, so, and it was a nonpartisan position, but I would say to date, and to give credit where credit's due, when time, like with the minimum wage bill and the earned sick leave bill, when we were up against the clock, our side of the aisle and the House negotiated with Senator Singh, was a part of that negotiations on the Senate side, and we got it done, and I think we came out with a pretty good bill. I was first elected in 2020. It was divided government then. Republicans controlled the legislature, and Governor Whitmer was in the, was in the executive office. And I think, and John and I came in at the same time. Senator DeMoose and I came in at the same time, and I think we got spoiled because we knew that if you wanted to get anything passed, you had to have bipartisan support. Bill packages had to be 50-50 Republican, Democrat. There was give and take, and you worked across the aisle and made good friendships, and it felt like you were doing important things. And I'm not here to say we just pass stuff for the sake of passing it so we can keep account, but that really kind of went away in my second term, and maybe we're still kind of feeling our way a little bit in this divided government part. But when the clock is starting to tick tock towards the end, that seems to be what the sense of urgency that we need to get these things done.
Well, let's talk a little bit about deadlines, sense of urgency. I've been around long enough, and I've actually been working in the state capitol building, I think longer than anyone who's up here on stage. And
Rick started covering Lansing in 1847. The horse and carriages were beautiful.
The boy governor was our governor at the time.
And people stepped in it back then too.
So you're someone we need to remove from the voter roll. Or according to what Republicans have been saying.
But I remember, the budget standoff in the 1990s, where we actually went past the deadline of the state's fiscal year on October 1st, and there were like discernible ramifications up in your part of the world, Senator, that there are a couple of drawbridges that had to be moved up and locked because the money wasn't there to pay for them, to keep people maintaining them, that state employees were told to go home. I mean, this is a real thing that has happened in Michigan history. Since then, one of the innovations that's been made is most school districts, local governments, universities, community colleges don't have a budget year that's aligned with the state's year that begins on October 1st. They begin on July 1st. And there is a state law that doesn't have any ramifications attached to it. But if you don't have a budget done and on the governor's desk by July 1st, the legislature is breaking the law. And I just want to start my right, your left, going around. Are we going to have a budget by July 1st?
Well,
Senator
I think it's going to be very difficult. I've been in the legislature. I've passed 8 budgets or voted on 8 budgets, 6 under Governor Snyder and 2 under Governor Whitmer, and all of them were done by July 1st. What we're seeing here is you typically have your first budgets from each chamber out in the early part of May before the consensus revenue estimating conference that happened a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago now. And then right now in June, we should be negotiating with each other. That way, then you can do the last 2 weeks, get all the language written up, and then you get the bills passed. Unfortunately, our colleagues in the House have not passed a single budget over to us. And that has disallowed us from not having any conversations on the budget. So even if the budget comes out in 2 or 3 weeks, we won't have enough time to negotiate it. So I think it's going to be very hard for us to get it done. You know, the speaker has said publicly and during his press conferences that he doesn't believe that July 1st is a real deadline. He actually said in some interview one point that he didn't know if it was even the Constitution required him to actually have a budget done by October 1. So there's a lot of mixed signals coming from the speaker, and I was hopeful that we would actually be looking at budgets from the chamber so we can at least begin negotiating, because we are pretty far apart at this point, and we know there's so much uncertainty at the federal level. There's so many cuts that are coming down over the next few weeks that we need to be at least figuring out our own budgets so then we can react to the federal cuts that are coming down to us. And I think, unfortunately, we're going to run out of time, but that didn't have to be the case because we've done it in the past. And I still think if there was enough focus and time put towards it, but hey, everybody was on the island last week. I know there's an important conference coming up where some of my colleagues are not going to be here in I think 2 weeks. And so I'm not feeling very optimistic that we're going to get the budget done by July 1st. And it's unfortunate.
Yeah, so same question, but also what are you hearing from your local governments, your mayors and local councils, your school superintendents,
Sure.
all of whom are going to have to deal with the fallout from this?
Well, I'll tell you what, I mean, you asked, the first part was, do we think we're going to have a budget? And I actually don't think we're going to have a budget. And I think it's absolutely irresponsible that we will not have a budget. I mean, imagine every other business on earth. Imagine your show here. We had to start at 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
Imagine all of a sudden we just decide, well, maybe we'll start at 7:30. And there's half an hour of dead air. I mean, you're not going to be on air next week. This is not how business is run or government.
I mean, I think the White House is trying to make sure we don't have a budget
Yeah.
either, but that's another conversation.
That's a different
for another
issue
time.
altogether. But I mean, the truth is, I became a Republican because I thought we were the party of responsible government, and we're the grown-ups in the rooms. And I'm not seeing it anymore right now. And I think we have a job to have it done. Well, I don't need a cheer. I'm already going to get excommunicated from my caucus tomorrow. So I just think we need to get it done. That's the rule of law. We have till July 1st.
Send your letters to Senator John DeMoose, P.O.
To the most beautiful place in Michigan. Representative Song, I mean, let's turn to you. You are in the House, in the minority in the House, watching what is happening with the budget. What are you hearing within your Democratic caucus about what's going on?
Seeing what's happening in real time is almost very surreal. Back in March, we had a shell bill dropped on our laps 30 minutes before we were supposed to vote. And this budget bill cut 90% of the state's budget and $5 billion from the school aid fund. And so since March, I've been sounding the alarm and just talking about the cuts that are coming down from the federal government, but also the state as well too. And I think it's very unfortunate because the real losers here are all of you and all the people of Michigan. And teachers are going to start seeing pink slips this summer. That's the reality. As a mom with 4 young children in our public schools, I can't help but think about our teachers. Which ones are going to get cut? What classrooms are going to get combined? What programs are going to get cut? And the schools have no idea because they won't know how much the state is going to send them in July. So that's why the July 1st deadline is so important so that schools can start to plan, because the school year starts in August and September. And so we don't have a lot of time. And the losers here are all of you. And elections have consequences. The reality is our colleagues elected a person to be the speaker who's making all of these decisions. And that's the reality of what we are dealing with here. and the cards that we've been given that we're trying to play to the best of our ability. But it's really the people and the children that are going to be suffering. And as we go through these next few weeks, we have to think about all of the things that we are going to lose, like the free breakfast and lunch program that I hear from so many parents about how important it is for us to be able to feed our kids. And I don't even know if we'll be able to include that in the upcoming budget. We're certainly going to be fighting for that. And I'm grateful that we have a governor who champions early childhood education and the GSRP program and transportation and special needs and at-risk children. So we need to get a school aid budget done at the very least, even if we don't do our state budget by September. I think that should be the compromise if we need to compromise, because we can't allow our schools to just be in the dark about what's happening in this Lansing bubble. And that saddens me, frankly, to know that teachers and our educators are going to be getting pink slips this summer.
Representative Tisdall, how dire is it?
Well, it is important that the schools particularly know as early as possible what kind of money they're going to have. I was eight years in the city council in Rochester Hills, and we always wanted to know what our revenue sharing checks were going to be and road funds and those kinds of things that were coming in. So timing is an important issue. It's also important to get the budget right. And I know that the structure on this side, on the House side, is very different this time around. There are several appropriation subcommittees that I do know for a fact are working hard on this. I'm not in appropriations, but many of my friends are chairing these subcommittees. They're carrying around big 3-ring binders, and they're going through line by line. You know, I would hope that we have a school budget out by July 1st. In the fail-safe or partial budget or backstop or emergency budget that was passed in March, we were talking about a $10,025 per student state foundation grant. The speaker is now talking about $12,000. Now, how can that be? Well, the $15 billion that was passed in March was foundation grant. There's another $5 or $6 billion in there in what are called categoricals. 2015, there were 30 categoricals. Today, we're at 150 to 200 categoricals, eating up $5-6 billion. And those dollars have to be spent on very specific services and items. And the school districts and the schools and the teachers have to document that those dollars are spent in that way, in compliance with the law. So part of what we're looking at now is spinning out some of those categoricals, putting it in the foundation, and letting the school districts make more of the decisions on what they need. So there are a lot of moving parts here. I would hope that by July 1st, we would at least have a school budget out there. I do know that there is work being done. We haven't submitted press releases or anything like that. They're just working at it. And Appropriations Chair Representative Ann Bolin is a very serious individual, a very detailed individual, and you know, it will be forthcoming.
And it is true, Representative, and Chair Bolin does have a lot of experience in budgets. But I think a question that a lot of people have, and I know you're not on appropriations, but you are in the majority caucus, is if budget flexibility, which a lot of people are for, is such a great idea, why is it only being discussed this late in the process?
Well, that I don't know. One of the issues in increasing the foundation grant significantly is in many school districts that can reopen collective bargaining agreements. So that's one issue that has to be concerned. If you take some of those categorical dollars and you replace the MIPSR dollars, or the Michigan Public Education
It's the
employee.
retirement fund.
Right, and which I think is 21% of their payroll. If you free up those MIPSR dollars, then those can be spent freely without reopening negotiations. So it might just be a way of how do you do this most effectively, grant the most flexibility without causing additional labor issues, which of course none of us want to face prematurely, before any contract is due.
I have a question for all of you, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. The 5 bills that have been passed so far, it was all reactive, right? So the first 2 bills, the first 2 bills had to do with changing the state's minimum wage and sick time leave laws. There was a deadline. It was February 21st before these laws went into effect. So lawmakers, worked right up until the moment that happened. Actually, a few hours after, happened in the middle of the night, they passed them. Then the next 2 bills had to do with the Secretary of State's office's website that has been just a disaster. Maybe someone will ask a question
This is
about
the
that.
campaign finance reporting website, or
Yep.
I'm sorry,
Disclosure,
the
transparency.
financial disclosure website.
Right. And there was a deadline for when disclosures had to happen. They were unable, not they, you all, were unable to upload necessarily your disclosure information. Reporters were unable to look at it. There was
The
a
public
deadline.
was unable to look at it.
So lawmakers voted, you all vote. I keep calling you lawmakers. You all voted to extend it by a month, right? So another deadline. And then this 5th bill had to do with storms, being reactive to this issue of students in school and how much time they were going to spend in school after lost school days because of the storm. I guess my question just simply, and I really am not being flip when I say I don't understand. I really want to understand is at what point does something sort of become a crisis? Because we're talking about a budget that fundamentally statutorily has to be done by July 1, by October 1 in the Constitution. That to me feels crisis worthy or reaction worthy. What happens where finally this it gets turned up to 11 where lawmakers are like, okay, now we really have to do it?
Well, if you look at all 5 bills, they had a deadline. The last bill, the deadline wasn't as apparent, but you have teachers who have other jobs in the community as soon as school is over. And the economies of those northern communities are all dependent on those teachers having a second job in many cases. So there was a deadline that we had to get to teachers and students and parents to fully understand what was happening there. So all 5 had a deadline. I also see this as budget has a deadline and we should have done it. There's another bill that had a deadline. We actually drove right by it. It's called it's a medical compact for doctors. Doctors have a compact if they actually got their residencies in another state that they could actually perform their services here in Michigan. We have gone past that. And I think the first doctor who's going to lose their license in the state of Michigan is going to be over the summer in the UP. He's got all his degrees and background in Louisiana. We have this compact so he can be a doctor up here. We have a doctor crisis, especially in the Upper Peninsula, and this doctor is going to lose his license, and there's hundreds of others that will happen over the months to come. But we went by that deadline last month, and I keep asking people, why haven't we brought this bill up? But we sent another bill. We sent over a Democratic bill. They said we wouldn't do it. So we sent over a Republican bill. Our colleague, Roger Houck from Mount Pleasant, we said, okay, Roger, you passed this bill. So we sent him a Republican bill. So if you don't want a Democratic bill, it's so important, we'll give you a Republican. And we still haven't seen action in the House. So far, everything has been done on a deadline, and they've been willing to go past deadlines. We've already seen one deadline, and I think, unfortunately, we're going to see the budget as well. But we've been reacting to these 5 bills based off of deadlines.
But Democrats are not without authority in this process. You've got a Senate majority. You've got a governor of your own party. We understand that you've got a House Speaker who has dug in his heels. And I guess just the question is, the way that the system is set up, how is this happening? And you talk to your colleagues. You have closed door caucuses.
I mean,
How
if you
is
want to
this
invite
happening?
us to be part of it too, we'll be there and listen, but
Well, the real
She
secret
might.
stuff,
yes, is he really going there? No, but it's a great question. I mean, this is fundamentally as journalists, I know sometimes you get frustrated at us because we're like, just covering the bad things that are happening. But from the outside, like fundamentally, this is what we can't quite comprehend and understand is at what point does it actually become an emergency? And I hear you say deadline. Yeah.
I just want to know how
I'm
it
going to
happens.
say the 3 Ps: priority, pressure, and politics. And I want you to remember that. I want you to see what their priorities are, because clearly some of these things that, Senator Sampson mentioned is not a priority to the majority caucus.
I wouldn't say the caucus. I think there's a lot of colleagues
In the House.
in the Republican caucus that agree with us.
Sure.
I think the fact
Really, it
the
could be the
speaker
leadership.
hasn't done it.
Yes, so priority, what are the priorities? We've seen they focusing on serious legislation like trying to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico, preventing certain communities from playing sports. Like these are their priorities. These are his priorities. And then you see the pressure, which is the deadline that you're talking about. And I like to describe that as like acupuncture, that everyone has pressure points. And depending on which button or the pressure, like how deep can you go to get a particular House Speaker to move legislation? There's lots of lobbyists, there's lots of private corporations, there's a lot at play that will put pressure on a certain group to move legislation. And then the politics, everything is just political. They're playing politics with people's lives instead of doing the real work that we were all elected to do. So I don't know if that helps you to understand what's at play, but
Well, I do
we're
want
only
to jump
seeing.
in. I want to jump into your, I don't want to interrupt. You're the host. You're the king. So, no, listen, I'm actually glad I got to go third because that's a really good question. I was just sitting here thinking about it. And so I love these type of programs because we so need to get past these just sort of sound bites and really start to dive into issues and think about things. But you're exactly right. And so I was trying to think, what was it about those issues? And it should be kind of encouraging to all of us with the tip credit and the sick leave. Literally every business owner I knew, and I'm not talking about business owners in other parts of the state because those, okay, yeah, fine. But like these are people who built a relationship with me saying, John, this is what's going to happen to our business. You have to do this. Then with the, we experienced it ourselves with those reporting bills where we tried to report. I mean, despite what anybody might think or what is reported, I don't really know a lot of crooks who are politicians. I mean, we are actually under the spotlight on everything we do all the time. And I'm afraid of breaking a law by accident. This is how, and so when we're doing these reporting things, we're logging onto the system. It's not working. Oh my God, the deadline's here. Everyone's going to think I'm hiding something. And so we had no choice. Again, the school thing, same deal though. So that was internal pressure, but the school thing, there was talk that at some point we were going to have to wait maybe until this week to pass it. And my school superintendent said, John, that I can't do that. We end school the next week. Our kids need to know, can they start their summer jobs? So what I'm saying is, I think what does it is hearing from our constituents, because we are all paid to listen to our constituents. And if we're doing a good job, we take it seriously. And I'm not talking about like big protests or marches on the Capitol. I find that more annoying than anything, frankly, and I'm certainly not talking about people who call and swear at me all the time. Those guys I just ignore. It happens all the time. But thoughtful constituents really reaching out and explaining to us this is a real problem. And maybe that's why some of those bills aren't passing, because I don't think a lot of people even know about that. But on the bills that matter, we've got, like with these budgets, we need to be explaining. I'll shut up, but I told a group back home that they need to start demanding more of their representatives. I don't just mean in the House of Representatives, meaning we've all heard this of like, look, guys, I agree with you, but I got to play the game right here. And they all just kind of nod and say, yeah, I get this. You're in a tough situation. They need to stop saying that. They need to start saying, no, this is important to us. You need to act now. And ultimately, we'll do the right thing.
Put more pressure on your electeds.
Are people saying that in the caucuses? Like one of the rules is, in the Lansing caucus is what happens in the closed door caucuses stays in the caucus. I don't care. When you are in your closed door caucuses with your colleagues, is anyone talking about that pressure?
Sure. I mean, there are 58 members behind our closed door, and there are 58 different districts that are being represented, and 58 different people that want to get reelected in their district, and the issues and the pressures and the demands are very different. As Mai and I have a similar situation. I was first elected in 2020. I was reelected in 2022. The governor was reelected in my district by 11.5 points, and I still won. So there are a lot of different things that go on here. You can break with your caucus, as I have on a number of times, but it can't be habitual, because caucus leadership has stuff I want. Yeah. Caucus leadership has stuff my district wants and needs. And so there is it's my dad used to say, it's a give and take world, and not by alphabetical order. You got to give first. And that's just a part of the atmosphere. And, I think it was actually on Off the Record with you, Chloe, maybe back in March or late February. And we had just passed that emergency budget. And that was in response to, when I was on Off the Record, I got the question back then, is the government going to close? And one of the issues the House leadership dealt with is, well, a way to put this, is the government going to close business aside, is let's just pass pay the salaries and keep the lights on budget, which we did. So that's at least that's already passed one chamber. And I'm not saying that's ideal or that's a road we want to go down, but that was a fail-safe, all the wheels fall off, at least that's there. But how it's going to work, when it's going to work, I know that people are seriously engaged on this. Listen, the first budget that was signed by Governor Whitmer was the 2019-2020 budget. The last is FY 24-25 that we're in right now. We're down 60,000 tax filings in that period of time. We're down 76,000 students in our public schools. But the state budget is up $4.5 billion ahead of inflation. If we look, we can find savings, we can help roads, we can pay for schools, we can do those kinds of things. And as Mai said, it is priorities. It's a question of priorities and pressure, and just getting the job done. And I started off by saying, I recognize that every bill that we've signed so far the clock was ticking. And the clock is ticking now, the work is being done. And, we'll see what comes out the other end of the sausage maker.
Well, that stopgap bill, though, just so I can respond, does not work, because it zeroes out lots of budget. It zeroes out the legislature's budget. We wouldn't have no staff. The lights wouldn't be turned on. It zeroes out the executive budget, the Department of State, and so many other departments that even if that was the budget, the government would essentially shut down. The only people who would get a salary,
the Department of Corrections, the state police, the courts.
State police.
Yeah, and we've got that covered.
Whether you agree it would shut down or stop the government from shutting down or not. I mean, we do have to say, for someone who is very fiscally conscious and aware of that, like, it was passed in a day and it was $20 billion. And it was passed in a day and it was $20 billion. Did that concern you? This government prevention shutdown
prevention budget
that was $20 billion, and basically in the morning it was like, we're going to vote on $20 billion by the end of the day.
Well, the intent is never to have it applied.
Well, there we go. Okay, we are going to open it up to questions, because otherwise we will continue to talk. So Vincent Duffy, who I mentioned will be going to the Christmas markets in Europe, I will also mention has a black belt. And this is why I say that. Because Vincent Duffy is holding the microphone. And Vincent Duffy is going to continue to hold the microphone as you ask your questions, which we're so excited to hear, but don't try to take his microphone, is what we're going to say.
I also want to let you know we have folks online who are contributing questions as well. And
Fun.
one that I wanted to get to first, because
Sure.
two of you mentioned the importance of applying pressure to your lawmakers. And
Mm-hmm.
this person wants to know, what is your preferred way to hear from constituents?
Oh, it's a great.
Attend the coffee hours, their in-district events, seek them out, not in Lansing. As Senator DeMuth said, he's annoyed with the rallies and protests and it's a distraction, but really having that one-on-one conversation and letting us know personally how this impacts you. Use your voice. Your collective voice is so powerful. So I encourage you to continue to do that.
I would say personalized emails too work really, really well. The form emails are okay. Just it's okay. Everyone's worried about this, but I'm not paying too much attention. I know that this is an issue. But if you take the time to write me a letter and are somewhat kind in the letter, I'm going to take the time to read it, and I'm going to most often respond myself with it. So I find that better than almost anything. Or stop me at home. This is amazing. It happens to us everywhere. My wife is just used to it that it takes.
You don't
half
mean
an hour.
your home. You
No,
mean
not
when
in
you're
my
out and about.
house in the home district. My wife's used to it. It takes us half an hour to leave any restaurant. But that's sort of my job. It's kind of what I signed up for. So.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I have coffee hours. I try to do 2 a month. In the summer, it gets down to 1, but we do all those coffee hours. We get a lot of participation there. I like to get, again, form emails and letters don't really work that well. They'll show me the stack. But if it is a personalized email, a personalized letter, it's going to get a different reaction from us. So even if you're doing a form letter, add the extra paragraph to it. So that way it gets to our attention as well.
Yeah. Rep. Tisdale.
Office hours, I'm very fortunate. I have Rochester and Rochester Hills. I can drive diagonally across my district in about 25 minutes. But the second Monday of every month, 6 to 8 p.m. at the library, I'm there. We've had anywhere from 0 to 45 people at once. And as Mai was talking about the 3 Ps, I have the 3 Ps. It's a professional, polite, persistent. You come in, name calling, yelling, those kinds of things. I'm 69 years old. I just don't need that. But people will schedule one-on-one meetings on Mondays and Fridays in our district days. We meet at the Desert Oasis coffee shop. I've sat with people for as much as an hour and a half that are really, real people that have real problems. And it's a delight when you can actually help someone out. So there are ways to do it. We're available. I would ask everyone as you leave here tonight, go home and ask your neighbor, who's your state rep? And my wife does it all the time. I think it's for my own ego reduction. But a lot of people just simply don't know, and they'll sit there and stew instead of just reaching out, because it feels so great when you can actually help someone.
Okay.
Vince, there you
And
are.
if you'll just, why don't you clap? Feel for there's some clapping there. Go for it. If you will say your name and where you're from.
My name is Frank Monticello. I grew up in New Jersey, born and raised in Jersey.
Jersey kid too.
Raised my children in suburban Philadelphia. First thing I want to say is the public radio is an essential part of the media, and I will say 2 words: Terry Gross. That's all you need. That's all you need to know. And so I'm just going to ask one quick question, and then I'm going to ask another question. I apologize for asking 2. As a point of reference, does the state of Michigan require that the U.S. Constitution be taught in Michigan public schools? Yes or no?
I don't know, but I don't think it's required.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so then here's my other question. Can each of you tell us in just 1 or 2 sentences? I just landed here from Mars. All of us are from out of the world. We landed here. You're representing the United States citizens. Some of you are, for some reason, Democrats. Some of you are, for some reason, Republicans. Can each of you give us 2 statements on why you chose to be either a Democrat or a Republican?
Are you auditioning for the next Terry Gross program? Is that what's going on here? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. My parents were very conservative. And so my first statement would be, I think that kind of, I was taken back about the Republican Party at an early age. The second thing is I chose to be a Democrat because I believe my values align with the Democratic Party. I believe in democracy. I believe in helping the poor. I believe in helping others who may not have as many resources or opportunities that I did growing up. I was born in a refugee camp, came to this country with nothing but the clothes on my back. And so I've seen how fortunate I've been able to benefit from our public system. And I want to make sure that other families have the same opportunities that I do. And I believe that the Democratic Party is the party of people, and that we are here to serve the people that elected us and the ones that didn't elect us. Because when I serve and people call my office, I don't ask them if they're Republican or Democrat or independent. I ask them, what do they need? How can I help them?
Rep. Tisdale, why don't
Yeah,
we go
sure.
this side and then this
Sure,
side?
I think the most unique feature, and I saw you, I believe you're holding a copy of the Constitution there. The most unique feature of the United States of America is that individual sovereignty and value and worth is paramount. And so being a constitutionally limited republic, there are guardrails, there are limits to which we can legislate, regulate, and determine how individuals live. And the government is a very blunt instrument. And so just as a Republican, my belief is that we want to apply it as lightly and as infrequently as possible.
Okay.
I know that, oh, Sam?
Why don't we let Senator Singh go next?
I would say I'm also a product of immigrants. My parents came from India in the 60s, and I will tell you that what I was brought up on, based on what they taught us, was what this country gave them. They gave my father an education when he went to North Carolina State. Ford Motor Company gave him his job for 35 years, and that was enough to be able to provide for my family and raise me and my brother. So I saw the value of the public education. I got in Livonia Public Schools. I saw the value at Michigan State. My father would not allow me to apply to any other institution but a public university in Michigan because that's where he paid his taxes to. Those were sort of those values that were given to me. And so when I took a look at what public service I wanted to provide that type of service back to my constituents, that opportunity that, hey, we can get you workforce training, we can get you a job, we can make sure you have the education. Those are the values that I was brought up on as a child. And my obviously parents came from another country, so they were not Democrat or Republican when they came here. But those values most aligned with the Democratic Party as I saw it as I was growing up.
Senator DeMoose.
Well, I know, I actually talk about this a lot because I know exactly what turned me into a Republican is I had what I think of as the honor and blessing of having grown up with Ronald Reagan as my president. And when I was 8 years old, he came into office, 16 when he left, and those were my formative years. And I remember, I'm sure when I was younger, I didn't even necessarily know what he was talking about, but he would give these great addresses from the Oval Office, and we would all, you know, you only had ABC, NBC, you know, ABC, CBS, and whatever, NBC, and they would all broadcast them live, and we'd all gather around the TV, and you just knew that the president of the United States was something larger than life. And as I grew and then researched more, I mean, he was just such a man of grace and civility and toughness, but kindness. And I have to say, I mean, in recent years, I'm questioning that because I think the Republican Party's moved a lot from that, but I want to get back to that because that was what drew me in for sure.
Okay, Vince, where's our microphone?
Right here in my hand.
Good evening, everyone, and I want to thank you all for everything you do. I've been pretty much living up at the Capitol for the last 5 years, fighting for the We Can't Wait. I want to thank you, too, for the across the aisle support we have right now. I want you to be aware there will be a bill coming up that will hopefully help save those who have been traumatized, and we've lost people. We've lost lives because of the change in the auto no fault bill that took place in 2019. And there's an misunderstanding that the Andary lawsuit solved the problems, and it did not. Utilization review, and this is a lot for people, you probably don't understand all this, but is really having a huge impact. So I'm just asking you to please be open-minded when that bill does come across, and hopefully we'll see some success. But see you at the Capitol. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just want to say, you're talking about the auto, for the public here doesn't understand some of these cases and things. This is the auto no fault law that was changed in 2019. You were in the legislature in 19,
No,
or
I came in after.
I was in a break from 2018. I was in the private sector for 4 years, and I watched that from afar because I had stopped what I thought was even a worse auto no fault reform bill back in 2017, 2018. When I was the Democratic leader. And I'd stopped it because I always said there was a better way to do this and have this conversation. I will say I was very disappointed in the results. I know it was bipartisan. I know it was signed by Governor Whitmer, but I always felt that it was the wrong law to sign. And there is a specific provision in there that basically took away benefits to people and their home health care. And there was a commitment by Republicans and Democrats at that time, knowing that they had rushed that bill to get it done, that we would fix that bill. That was 2019. We're now in 2025. We haven't done it, and it's a mistake. And I'm glad that John DeMoose is a partner in this, along with many others in the Senate. We passed the bill over to the House. And unfortunately, the House didn't get it done last year. We're going to do it again. But it is a wrong that we have to right eventually.
I want to say one thing, too, because going back to the first question we had about how to engage. Now, I did say that about protests, only because I got yelled at about election security protests and people in my face. Presence is important. And one of the best forms of activism I've seen is exactly what you personally did with your son. I remember when I was a brand new legislator, that was like Michigan Potato Day or something, and they announced that there was gifts in the speaker's library from the potato industry. So we all go dutifully walking in. We got a cool like iron skillet, and then I walked back.
Cherry barbecue.
Whatever it was. So we're out there, and it was the stupidest scene I've ever seen, because you saw a long line of legislators walking back with goofy smiles on their faces with these iron skillets, and you were standing there with your son, and a lot of people were there. And so I just said to myself, wait, what's going on here? It stopped. And you were there to talk. Again, never accusatory, explaining exactly what happened. We met your son. I love your son. He's always been great to talk to. And the bottom line is, Senator Singh is right, that we talked about that last year. I didn't want another year to go by with still no answer for you. And we've got to make that a priority for now. But your engagement is how things should be done.
For folks who'd like to learn a little bit more about the changes in the auto no fault system, our reporter Tracy Samilton at Michigan Public has done some really, really long form investigative work, and I'd really love to highlight her work. And you can go to michiganpublic.org and find it. Okay, we have some more questions.
We have someone in the back who's been wanting to.
I'm going to go here, and then I'll get you right after that.
Thanks. I'm Caitlin. I'm from right here. I live in DeWitt. I work for one of our very fine state departments. Very interested in that budget bill. And I hear from all of you a common thread that you really just want to get the work done. We're here as a bipartisan panel tonight. What are some actionable items that you will do after this open conversation where you all have so much in common wanting to get things done for us? What will you do after this before July 1st to get that bipartisan support and get that bill passed?
Well, I'll bring it up to our leadership. I can tell you our comms team and the people that I work with every day already know I'm here, right? And so I'm assuming they'll be listening to this either now or if it's.
They could be watching now.
They very well could be. So the leadership is very aware of this. And the speaker is going to do it his way. And that's within his authority and power. And we'll just, we can continue to push and make recommendations. But again, it's 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 kind of a team effort, and but they know people are anxious. This isn't the first crowd that has brought this up, and it'll just be reinforced, and that's about the extent of what I can do to make it happen any faster.
I'm going to commit to showing up every day and counting down to July 1st. I think we have 26 days left. Certainly talking to my colleagues, both Republicans and Democrats, and putting pressure on them to let them know how critical it is for us to do the job that we were elected to do.
I would just say, I mean, I think a lot of us are actually doing it, and the Senate has been working pretty well, at least in my mind. We're passing a lot of good bipartisan stuff. We have lots of great conversations. I've been talking as far as what I could do in the Senate. Had a great talk with Sarah Anthony, who's from right around here. She's awesome.
The Democratic Appropriations Chair in
Democratic
the Senate.
Appropriations. I actually texted her after your thing last week, and I said, I had no idea I was such good friends with the ultimate Lansing insider. Somebody actually called her that the other day. But we have these relationships, so I feel like the Senate's working pretty well. I really just think the House needs to kind of come along with us. So.
Yeah, and I would just say, I know I saw the speaker last week. We had a conversation. I've been working with Kevin Hertel, Representative Brixey, a number of people. I know Senator DeMoose supported this on trying to change the statute of limitations on a set of criminal sexual conduct bills. I asked the speaker to meet to discuss that. I also know that the Senate is ready to talk about roads. We're ready to talk about the budget. We're ready to talk about economic development. And then all the bills that we've already sent over. So I think we are ready to have that conversation. We'll continue to say that to the leadership. Our leader, Winnie Brinks, who is the Senate Majority Leader, I know has reached out to continue that conversation. But we're ready to be at the negotiating table, and the time is now. And so whenever they are ready, whenever they pass their budgets, I know Senator Anthony is ready to work with Rep. Bowen. I know there's every subcommittee is ready to go. We can get targets out pretty soon on each of those budgets, and we can begin working on it. I think we could turn around about a framework of a budget by June 30th, and you could probably get the rest of the language right in like 2 or 3 weeks after that. So I think there's a way to get all of this done. I'm hopeful, and I always be optimistic because I always want to be focused in a positive way. But we have offered all of those things, and now we're just waiting for the response.
Well, and you took, with that school bill, I just want people to know what you did. I think you guys said, okay, we'll take the first step. I really believe that, and as part of that, I said I'd get up and thank the majority for rising above politics to do this. And I think that was the olive branch, and hopefully that more will follow suit now from the House side.
And you said that the optimistic projection is getting it done by mid-July.
I think August 1st is probably the reality of where we are right now. But I think you could have a framework that could at least tell the schools this is where we have agreed. You could tell the communities. But I also want to remind people it's just not those groups, and it's not all local governments. It's hospitals, it's mental health facilities, it's our nursing homes that get Medicaid. Everybody's on one of those other dates outside of October 1st. There's not many people that are on an October 1st deadline. Most of them either start in January, their fiscal year, or they start on July 1st. And so we need to be moving on all this stuff. We shouldn't, I know there's a lot of talk about just getting the education stuff done. Maybe that's where we end up, but I got to say, there's so many other important people in our community that are depending on the services of all these other institutions that we don't often hear about, and those people will be harmed if we don't figure out some of these budgets soon.
Okay, I'm keeping an eye on the clock because we've just got a time for a few more questions. So yeah, hi.
Hi, Brad Clark, Lansing, Michigan.
Hi, Brad.
Michigan has a missing senator. Would you talk about the governor's political calculus to keep that seat vacant and the consequences of her decision?
Sure. So let's just set the table really quick for those who are not that political. That is the question, Jeff. So there right now is an open Senate seat right now in Michigan's upper chamber. That is because Kristen McDonald-Rivet, who was a state senator, won in November. She is now Congresswoman Kristen McDonald-Rivet. And in Michigan, when there is an open seat in either the House or the Senate, the governor gets to call basically for a special election. And it has now been an insane amount of time since this was an open seat and since the governor has declared that there will be a special election for this seat. So the 35th Senate district right now doesn't have representation. And for months, I would say, early in the year, Republicans were really pushing this. But interestingly enough, it feels like there's a little bit of a shift. Even Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist up on Mackinac Island last week seemed to allude to the fact that he was sort of anxious too to see when the governor would announce. Representative, you're nodding your head. What are your thoughts?
So I actually ran in a special last year, and so I sort of can relate to this filling an open seat. You know, I certainly sympathize with those constituents who are out without a state senator right now, but I will point out that there are 4 state reps whose districts overlap. And if there are constituents who have concerns, I would redirect them to one of our state representatives who they can still speak to in the state legislature. So that isn't something that has gone away. But under the Constitution, the governor gets to call that special election, or she can have it at the next general election, which would be essentially in November of 2026. So that's not something that we as a legislature or anyone can change, other than if we were to pass, a constitutional amendment.
Yeah, and what the Constitution says is that the governor shall, but it doesn't give a time frame. And just as Maya was saying earlier, we've got 9 bills that were passed in the 103rd legislature, and the Constitution says the legislature shall present, but it doesn't say when, and it's. So, that
What he's saying is that there are 9 bills still hanging out there.
Yeah, but in this case, it clearly outlines that she can do it in November. So even if we were to pressure her and say, hey, you need to do this, well, the Constitution says she has until the next general election, November, to call a special election. So as a legislature, we can't do anything about that.
But we should not
Can
let
I just say, I just want to say one thing. So absolutely right. This is not the role of the legislature, it's the role of the executive branch. But I will say that oftentimes when you look at special elections, there was already an election planned. There is not a local election in November or August in any of these communities that are in that 35th district. So there's going to be a cost to an election. And the cost of the election, we've done this in the past, we have paid money from the state to the locals to run those elections. We had an opportunity to have a bill, which was the supplemental bill to close the books. We could have put money into that. I believe that we have to have a conversation about funding that election for the locals because they don't have the resources. They've already been cut to the bone to begin with, and we should be paying for that election. But, we had a close of the books that we do every year. Every year. This is the first time that I've seen a House Speaker say, well, I'm not going to close the books. And so we never did the closing of the books in the traditional way. And so that bill never got passed. We could have actually funded that election and had a conversation. I am confident that there will be a special election at some point, but I am hopeful that in the budget, we will help pay for the election because we shouldn't be putting that on the backs of the local communities. That's another reason for us to get serious about this budget.
But I don't.
Senator, I'm sorry, yes or no, answer this though, that if this were a lean Democratic seat and it were a close minority in the Senate, would it have taken this long?
Listen, this is no different than what I saw under John Engler when you look at the Fred Durhal senior seat. There have been a lot of these things. So I'm not going to compare every single election. This is not, I think, too far away from what John Engler did back in the 1990s. What I'm saying is we have traditionally tied this to other local elections. There is not another local election. That means we need to pay for it. And what I would want to focus on is actually finding the resources, putting it in the budget, and I think that will help facilitate this conversation.
But I mean, if John Engler did it in the 90s, I would argue he was wrong to do it then too, but that was a long time ago. The point of the matter is I can't see any legitimate non-political reason not to let these people have a senator. And I can guarantee that you're not going to have any problem getting that election funded from our side on that. I mean, I think we're walking around with buttons that say free the 35th, which may be a little over the top, but still.
Yeah, there was a Valentine's Day meme that the Republican senator sent out. That was something
I
like,
need a bill with the, or button with the 9 bills.
there you
get
go.
paid.
Okay, final question. Yes.
Hi, I'm rather new at this, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but I was a little concerned about the couple of comments about how someone was a little bit upset about protests or rallies here at the Capitol building. I just want to remind our legislators that there are a lot of residents that live here in the Lansing area, East Lansing, Eaton Rapids. I mean, where there's a big population. Do you suggest that we all travel to Traverse City or to where's that, Rochester Hills? Maybe Macon, or what is it, Macomb County? Sorry, Macomb County. And that would be a little challenging for someone like me who has a vision disability who cannot drive. So I would be very, very careful about stating that you're concerned or you're irritated about all of the things, because there are a lot of people who actually do live here, pay taxes, and have representation. I'm not sure if that representation is present today. But I do have one question. As a former special ed teacher, I wanted to find out if there are any of you who can answer the question, when you're looking at your budget, okay, for special needs students, are you taking into account, like, how much is IDEA coming into your line of vision when you're looking at budget cuts? Or rearranging things, recategorizing things, your categoricals?
Yeah, I will say 2 things on special education funding. So one is, you know, the president has talked about eliminating the Department of Education. We haven't figured out exactly how he's going to replace the functions of that. A lot of our special ed funding comes from the federal government down to our local communities. And that's a huge amount of revenue that if it's not done appropriately, not done in the right way, even if it's a block grant, if it's not done in the right way, we could lose special ed funding at the federal level. The problem with this idea of always moving up all the categoricals and letting the school districts decide is that we put money into a special line, in a categorical line, to fund special education. We have never, with the exception of the last couple years, have ever really fully funded special education. You talk to any school district, north, south, urban, rural, suburban, we've never funded it well. The last couple of years, because of some surpluses, we've actually got closer and closer to at least meeting our minimum obligation to special education funding. And I get really nervous when people say it's just easy to let the school districts decide. We put money in many categoricals because we want that money to follow the student that actually needs that money. And that's why we have categoricals. You know, CTE funding, we want to make sure those are all funded well. We want to make sure that, you know, at-risk students are funded. When you move all the money up into a categorical, that means a whole bunch of districts that might not have at-risk students, might not have as many special needs students. They're going to get that money at the expense of those other schools that have those students. And that's why I think, you know, as we have this debate on whether we should put all the money in a categorical, which is what, you know, my colleagues in the House have been talking about, versus keeping some of those really key categoricals. I agree. We could probably move up a number of those into the base, but I am worried that, especially around special education, that's going to get rounded up, and money's not going to follow the student and the need.
Yeah, the IDEA, the individual education plans, the 504s, all of those things. It's always been my understanding that that's primarily driven by the intermediate school districts, of which there are 56 in this state. But again, as the senator said, yeah, there's room to free up some of those categoricals. Rochester Community Schools has 15,000 students. They're well in the 6 figures in compliance just at the school district level. let alone what the principals and the teachers are putting into that compliance as well. So it's that balance. You want to address the needs that are there, and the IDEA and the individual education plans. Those are federal requirements, and so those things do need to be addressed. But it's that question of how do you best do it, and we almost have the worst. You got me on a roll now. We almost have the worst of both worlds here. We have 886 school districts in the state of Michigan when you count the charters and the academy. So we have this hyper-localized administration, which people like. And they spend an inordinate amount of their time complying with state and federal requirements. So you have centralized control telling hyper-localized control what to do day in and day out. It would certainly cost less than to have the two concurrent systems running side by side. I'd like to see it go one way or the other. If you turn it over to the locals, they're controlled by locally elected school boards, and that's where the local voters can have the greatest impact. And I didn't intend to minimize it if I did, but it's recognized as a priority and an obligation.
Yeah. Okay, I am watching time. If it's one final, really quick one. Okay. Okay.
Gosh, I'm Adam Alessio from East
Hello,
Lansing. And thank you for your service during challenging times to all of you. I don't have an easy question. My question is probably the hardest one. There's a lot happening at the federal level. I realize you're responsible for state governance, but a healthy state governance would be responsive to the things happening at the federal level. Can you just comment on how you're being strategic, given there's a lot of changes coming from the federal level?
I will say that our budget office, our fiscal agencies are looking at all the cuts, and I will tell you 40% of the state budget is federal dollars. It's not uncommon. Most states, some have even higher amounts coming from the federal government. And the cuts that are being talked about are going to devastate things like Medicaid, school funding, and a variety of other areas. And so we're spending most of our time as we're looking at our own budgets, taking a look at what the impact of those other cuts are going to be and other programmatic changes. So it's hard to quantify all of that right now, but I will say the biggest thing that is on my, bearing on me is how are we going to help those people that are going to be cut from Medicaid? We're probably going to lose 500,000 people that have health care now because of Medicaid. We're probably at least going to lose that based on some of the congressional business office numbers. And it keeps me up because those people are going to be out on the road with nothing there, no safety net, and the state doesn't have the money to fill the gap.
Senator?
Well, there's not much I can say to follow that. I think you're exactly right, Senator, saying right now we have the opportunity with our budget to do some really great things. But first of all, I don't think half the things we hear about at the federal level are actually going to happen. But if they do, it changes all the math of this thing. One thing I will say, because I'm one where, it's a role of government to provide for the domestic tranquility. I mean, this is written that we should be doing this, and we don't see any domestic tranquility right now. So I have a real problem with a lot of what we're seeing in Washington. However, when this is done and we get through this period, I think there's a lot of soul searching on all of our parts that needs to be happening, because you look at these cuts, and right now it's scary, no question about it. But since I was a kid in the 70s, I've been hearing about the $10,000 hammers at the Pentagon. And it doesn't matter if it was a Republican administration or a Democrat administration, they were all spending like crazy over and over again. And you're bound to get a guy who stands up and says enough and just starts breaking things. And that's what we got by not dealing with the problem along the way. And so I think it's really scary what's happening right now. Some of it's probably good. All of it's being presented poorly in my mind. But once we get through this, the next few years, we do really need to come together and think about how do we do a better job so this doesn't happen again.
Representative?
I think what you guys need to realize is what's happening at the federal level. You can expect that from the Republican majority of the House. They're emulating everything that the federal administration is doing. And in talking about doging our state budget, and as Senator Singh said that 40% of our budget is federal dollars, and we can't afford to lose more funding. Our state can't fill in those gaps. And people are looking to us to see if we can, as states, step up and fill the gap. But the reality is we cannot do that. But if knowing this about these federal cuts, we really do have to be strategic about how we are going to allocate funding. And for me, it's about putting money back into the pockets of working families and seniors, those that need it most, and lowering the cost of living. Because we know that these tariffs and all of these other things coming down from the federal administration is going to increase the cost of living, increase the cost of groceries. And it's unfortunate that as a state, we have to try and fix other people's problems. For example, trying to figure out how we can have like a tariff relief package just to address these unnecessary things that are happening. And so I'm going to continue to fight back and to talk to my federal, congressional and leaders and senators and let them know that, you guys have to advocate for us at the federal level because we can't afford to lose 40% of our state's budget.
Okay, Representative Tisdale, the final
Well,
word.
and when I mentioned earlier that the state budget in 6 years is now $4.5 billion above inflation, even though we've lost 60,000 tax filings, some of those could be joint. That excludes the federal dollars. Look, there's been an awful lot of drama. It's only been 4 months, but it seems like it's been a lot longer than that. But if I'll leave you with something that keeps me up at night, in the last administration and some in the preceding administration, short-term treasuries and T-bills were used to fund the debt. There are 9 trillion of those short-term debt instruments need to be refinanced this fiscal year. The federal government is going to run another $2 trillion deficit. So in this fiscal year, a 12-month period, the government needs to sell $11 trillion worth of new debt. The three of the largest buyers, Japan, China, and Saudi Arabia, are selling their treasuries. They're not buying. So how do you get the market to buy $11 trillion worth of debt? You either raise the rates, which is inflationary, or you turn the printing machine back on, which is inflationary. So we can argue about the 40%. We're broke. We don't have 40% to send to any place. $11 trillion has to be refinanced, has to be sold this year. And that is the single biggest issue in my mind.
Adam, I'm going to take your question and I'm going to actually answer it with my own, if that's okay. I got to meet Adam and his lovely wife, Andrea, when they first came in. And one of the things that you thanked us for, right, is trying to bring some amount of calm, whether you can or not, by listening to the news, by better sort of understanding what's happening in your community and in your state and in the world. These are sort of the stories that we are trying to tell with public media. And so one of the things that I try to do is stay up to date in the news. And I know that can be really, really, really overwhelming sometimes. But all of you are here right now in an evening, right now, given at a bar, but in an evening talking about policy. And so I just want to name my gratitude to everyone in this room and for the lawmakers here on this stage for having conversations. Again, I think everybody probably heard things that you disagreed with, but we all heard them. And I think modeling that kind of behavior now more than ever is really important.
Candid and respectful is good.
Candid and respectful is good. And so I'm also going to end this evening with being very candid. which is we don't always talk about ourselves in public media. We don't like to cover ourselves in public media, but unfortunately we are in the news. As you have likely heard, public media fundamentally is under attack right now. I'm not being hyperbolic, it simply is. And this week, something called a rescission package was put out by the White House. What this would do is essentially claw back funding that has already been given to public radio stations. Part of the Public Broadcasting Act that was signed into law decades and decades ago was actually that funding is distributed 2 years in advance, specifically so that public broadcasting, your broadcasting, wouldn't be able to be a political football. A rescission memo was just introduced yesterday. The House and the Senate in DC have now 45 days to vote. They strictly just need a majority vote. And so I'm going to do something that I don't normally do, and I'm going to actually ask folks to do something for public media other than 888-258-9866. And that is, if you look at your tables, there is a QR code where you can learn more about Protect My Public Media. You can also go to michiganpublic.org/protect. Your voice in all of this has power. One of the reasons that the rescission memo is coming out now instead of months ago was because more than 1 million folks have already signed up at Protect My Public Media, and you are letting your Congress folks and your senators know. And so I am asking you to be a part of this mission today so that we can continue to bring folks like this on stage and have these kinds of conversations, because I'll just say they're not happening elsewhere.
And we'll be back with more John Denver as soon as you ask. So
888-258-9866. And hey, at the beginning, we talked about the fact that there were prizes because, again, public media and swag. And so I got the winners here. You ready to hear who won the public media swag bags? Kenneth O'Hara. Yay, Kenneth!
You're a winner.
Oh, stop it. I promise this is not rigged, but Andrea, you're the other winner. I know. Congratulations. A big thank you to our bipartisan panel for answering our questions and your questions this evening.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
Thank you.
the time and the effort.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone for your support for public media tonight. Have a good night.